first of all, we drew the short straw. We've got the 4:30 slot at the end of a conference, right? And so we're going to try and keep you amused by being verbally abusive to each other, right?
Oh my God. First of all, I would like to introduce myself. I'm here for our CEO and my co-founder, Raphael Jonen, who is ill. So I made the short trip from Düsseldorf, Germany, over here to represent Aux Money. Aux Money is Europe's, or continental Europe's, biggest marketplace lending company for consumer lending. We are doing around 600 to 700 million per year in consumer loans. And we are based in Düsseldorf. We have 160 people working on our product. Most of them are on the engineer side, technical side, and growing a lot, growing currently around 70 to 100% per year, and having a lot of institutional money backed up by Aegon, who also was on stage. Yeah, that's about us.
Right. My name is John Mould, and I run the same sort of platform in the UK. We although we've been going 7 or 8 years, we really started our growth 1 or 2 years ago. We do about 100 million plus per year. We're growing at the same rate. We have a total of about 40 or 50 people, but we're in the SME space. So we're not consumer, we're business loans, but it's roughly the same business doing the same thing.
Also fully automated?
No, but we'll come back to that.
That's what we do.
Yeah, because I think they're slightly different. Should I give you my background before doing what I'm doing now? Right, so the reason why I'm going to sit here and talk about banks is that I started as an accountant and then I worked for a huge US investment bank for 12 years. And I'm very familiar with their IT and various other things, not a retail bank, investment bank. Then I moved into asset management. And I sort of CEO of a couple of whopping big asset managers. So I'm very familiar with their IT and how good they are. And then I move into fintech. Now, some fintechs I think have got good IT, but most don't. Anyway, that's my background. And I'll talk, just like you talked in a moment, about what I've seen in banks and the IT.
So you're saying most fintechs don't have good IT infrastructure and don't have good products?
Okay, let's put the groundwork, which I think you helped do. Banks, the bank I used to work for at Canary Wharf had 3 data centers in Canary Wharf, about the same size as this room, full of servers. 25% of their staff was IT. Going back to your point, they are virtually IT companies. They had a data center down at Heathrow that was so big it could hold 4 jumbo jets, right? It's huge. They had hundreds of staff in Bangalore. They had huge cables. They could literally turn, the hardware was unbelievable, and software, they could create things literally overnight. Now, that's a big investment bank. And the retail banks in the UK, the Barclays and what have you, I think are not far off that as an IT. But actually, it's not, quote, it's not the size of the IT, it's how you use it. So we'll come back to that. So coming up to the asset managers, I think their IT, I'm going to call about a 6th. It doesn't even scratch the bank's IT. And some fintechs, I think, have pretty good IT, but I think 90% don't have good IT. Debate.
I understand banks have very good IT. Otherwise, they wouldn't be possible to handle that mass of data they are used to handle every day. I think how you make business with these IT infrastructure totally differs from the fintech business, for example, we are doing. So if we have an idea, 2 weeks later, we can be up with a small product, testing it, and the banks need years to develop a product, not because of the IT or because of the programmers or whatever, but because of their legacy, because they have so much volume of data to carry with, which all has to fit to this new product, which makes it very difficult to them to launch new product because it may interfere somewhere at some point with what they already have done for the last couple of years. And that's why they are slow. I don't think they're slow because they don't have good IT infrastructure. On the other side, the fintechs are fast, although they don't have good IT infrastructure sometimes, I admit to that, but they are overselling. So if the fintechs are overselling and the big IT banks are not overselling, they want to do it right from the first day on because they are not in the position to oversell, I think that's the biggest difference in speed of development and speed to market which we see.
Good, that's interesting. First of all, am I the agree? I think I'm the disagree. No, I think I'm losing, and I think you're winning, Philip. Is that right? Is that what people think?
I never saw this.
The big banks already have better technology than fintechs. Agree. So you're winning so far, Philip, right? Okay, I'm going to fight back on this one. I totally agree with you about it's what the banks can't do is they can't use their IT, right? First of all, as you said...
For new ideas.
Yeah, first of all, their IT has got to absolutely focus on their back book, yeah? And every time they want to do anything new, they've got to look at the impact on their back book, right? Secondly, you're right, there's loads of bureaucrats sitting in banks that when the IT guys or the product guys come up with ideas, they can't possibly get those ideas to the forefront, yeah? So, well, the real question is, so am I saying that fintechs can get product out quicker? Absolutely. Am I saying that they can do stuff without people stopping them? Absolutely. But what I fundamentally believe is if the banks can solve their bureaucracy issue, if they can sort of carve out niches and work out what they want to do strategically, I think they should be able to totally wipe out fintechs. But now, question is, can they do that?
I think they can if they have the right people at the right place, because I don't think it's a matter of idea, it's a matter of doing. And as long as the big banks take their time to think about the strategy, the fintechs has already launched the product and tested it on the market. So in my opinion, big banks should have something like a hub or like a product lab or something, which big banks already do, but not just to develop ideas, but to launch new products on the market under a second label with a totally new team which is in distance to the bank, which is totally independent.
Yeah.
And if you have an independent team with money from the bank and maybe even some technology transfer from the bank, you will have a chance as a bank to develop a product at the same speed like the fintechs do, but with more financial power, because fintechs, and everybody who starts with a new company knows this, you have to figure out, how do I invest my business? How do I finance my business? Where do I find investment? How do I find people? How do I do my bookkeeping? And so on and so on. And the bank has it all. So they could invest the business, they could fund the business, they could give you the people because they have a big HR department doing all that. And I ask myself, why don't all the big banks just do it that way?
A lot of the reasons are the people at the top of the big banks have never been in startups, don't know those facts. They don't know it's bloody hard work, which you've quite rightly pointed out. I think also that they're, now especially, they're very reticent to do stuff due to the regulators, because banks are being looked at. They're regulated by the PRA, they're regulated by the FCA, and fintechs are lightly regulated. So every time they try and do something or want to do something, they think, well, how's that going to be impacted? Yeah,
but we could carve it out and make an investment in something like a
you say
incubator for financial new business, and that incubator is owned by the bank.
To be fair, I think the UK banks have lots of incubators sitting out in Shoreditch, Old Street, and places like that. Yeah, so they could, but invariably they're still big, they're still bureaucratic, And I don't think they can give free rein to their IT. So, my view is their IT is better, but they're not using it as they could or should. And even on the incubators, it's very different from being in a sort of incubator for a bank than being a proper startup. A proper startup is hard bloody work. No one looks after you. As you say, you have to raise money, raise debt, raise equity. You have to put in processes. You have to build a market. No one in these big banks has ever done that. They built their market 100, 150 years ago. Yeah. So I'm not really arguing much to say. So I'm still putting the point they have superb IT, but they just don't bloody use it.
They need a skunk works.
Sorry?
They need a skunk works.
Skunk works?
Do you know what skunk works is?
What is it?
It's an autonomous little team inside.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Completely separated from the bank, an independent team motivated by some assets in this new
But that only works if you've got a senior person in a bank who goes, you're in the skunk works, you're in the separate team, and invariably what happens is they work away for 2 months, then they have to justify what they're doing to someone else in the bank, and then there's a freeze on, yeah?
The skunk works. The skunk works had genuine autonomy. They're not being Martins in the late 50s and 60s. They did wonderful technical developments because they would never have done, apparently, unless they had a skunk.
I totally agree. The question is, does anyone know here, audience participation, of any major bank that's actually managing to do that? Sorry?
So JP Morgan has the SSD, Barclays has.
So I get JP Morgan. Do you think they're being successful at it?
Yes.
Good, great. So you're on my side, but they've got better IT than fintechs, yeah?
JP Morgan has 350 of the world's brightest engineers working on.
Absolutely. But what stops them then from great products?
So to be fair, JP Morgan in the UK isn't in the space we're talking about. I worked at the other organisation with one of those words in, and the absolute investment banking space could turn things like that. What we're not seeing is that coming out of the retail banks. We are seeing RBS, as we saw earlier, doing ESME, and that's great. But interestingly, they didn't build that kit themselves. They went and got that kit from EasyBob. Yeah.
Yep.
So I'm arguing against myself again.
Buying infrastructure at an early point of time is also a method to get the whole bright people as well as the product in-house to a bank too. I mean, that would be also a way, but banks are very hesitated to buy.
Yeah. So anyone else seen, you talked about Barclays. I know they've got their, did you mention Barclays? I know they've got their thing in Shoreditch, but so far I don't think I've seen anything come out of that. It's not obvious. Please.
How old is it?
2 years, 3 years.
2 years, right? You mentioned that with the incubator, right?
Yeah.
They have an incubation team partnering with 10, 12 different fintechs and
So then the question is more, why isn't there coming out great products, great companies out of these incubators where a lot of bright people backed by a huge investment company? I mean, this must work, doesn't it?
Anyway, which goes to my point. If we're having a strict debate, therefore the bank, especially someone like JP Morgan, has much better IT, but for some reason I don't think they can use it.
So maybe it's not lacking of the IT, it's not lacking on good programmers, not lacking on money, but then it's lacking founders.
Mm-hmm. Is that not a disadvantage all the infrastructure that they have between data centers, IT infrastructure from traditional banks?
So I think
Is that not a disadvantage in some ways as well? Having all that IT infrastructure.
If you have too much IT infrastructure.
In the sense that you can just go to AWS, Azure now, and get it from there, and then focus on your product versus managing all the.
So undoubtedly, one of the issues of the historical banks is they've got tons of data they've got to maintain, and everything's got to be integral. Where of course you start off, you can start afresh, yeah. And we heard in the previous panel that most of the bank's infrastructure was built in the 1960s and 1970s. So yes, I think that is a disadvantage. And I think if you were to even go to JP Morgan, you'd find that 60, 70% of their IT people are keeping the past going without being able to focus on the future. Yeah.
So maybe it's not only about the developing process of a new product, but also about the marketing process. So maybe these people have good technology at their hand and could easily rebuild what the fintechs are doing, but cannot market it. I would by far more question that, because if you market it, you have to go out there and tell everybody that what you're doing. And then it gets dangerous, because then you're out there with your name. And probably they could do it if they want, but it's by far more secure to wait, see what develops, and then throw money at it and buy it, because then you don't do anything wrong.
I would agree with that point. I was in a sort of lunch with CEOs of asset managers, and one of the COOs asked me, should we, this big asset manager, part of a big UK bank, should we be investing in fintech? And I said, whatever you don't do that, because unless you set up your skunk works, invariably you can't deliver product, you can't get the investment going. Agreed. Yeah.
That's what I mean. You always have to decide whether build or buy. Yeah. And for the big banks, I think it's much more easy to buy because you're not on risk. Mm-hmm. But it would be cheaper to build and have full control and already make the product custom fit to your organization. And I think that would be the biggest advantage in building. On the other side, you don't have to be first with the best idea. Be second or be third. Build a nice product which fits to your core bank systems, because then it's much easier than buying and to migrate the whole business into your core bank system, which probably is a little bit difficult, and you lose probably half of the staff by integrating into your big bank environment.
Yep, correct. Anyone else got any comments from the floor?
When a big bank buys a startup, inevitably dries up, like you can both go in the desert, because the startup just speed up on its inside very big processes. It's still so easy for big bank to buy. It's easy to buy than to make. It's really hard.
I totally agree, and I've seen that, things being bought and then things being sold 2 or 3 years later because the thing or just evaporates. I totally agree with that, because their structures aren't capable of handling it. Because I agree.
Okay, but now we are going into problems here. If you have better technology, you have more money, you can build it, but actually you can't because you're not separate enough. Mm-hmm. If you buy it, you can't integrate it because then it just disappears.
So going back to it,
there is no solution for big banks.
It's not the technology that's the problem. It's the mindset in these organisations to be able to create skunk works, to be able to carve it out, to be able to use what they've got to deliver product. Yeah.
Has there ever been any bank anywhere delivering a good fintech product?
The investment banks have. Yeah.
And I can add one to use the example First Direct. So the classic example, going back to my beginning, was HSBC. That's why I sort of mentioned it. And it had a business, and it was called First Direct, which is still a fantastic business. And it is virtually a skunk work, which is it's in Bradford, is it? I can't remember where it is now. It's literally in an isolated part of what for them is their country, and it works fabulously. It's a really good product. And that actually, they literally let the skunk works go, and that was 10 years, 15 years ago.
15 years.
15 years ago now. That is actually a prime, it was way before everybody else, which shows the banks can do it.
And to be fair to the banks, also, if you look at all the apps they're producing now
for
mobiles, NatWest, all of them are pretty damn good.
And that's that's exactly the other challenge I was going to come back on both of you, because you've both got the unwritten assumption that the banks are rubbish, yeah? Now, by and large, most of them are. Yeah. So I bank with some terrible banks, but Nationwide is exactly a good example. And actually, even going back to the HSBC, some of the big banks actually their fintech product it's best not to be too snobby about it. It's pretty damn good, actually. It's the likes of Starling and Tandem are fantastic on Wizzy, but it works.
Okay, debate what a fintech product is.
Yeah.
Okay, if you're talking about internet banking and app banking, I get you that the retail banks are pretty good at that.
Yeah, they're not bad.
Yeah, but they are building apps which fit their core product.
But
That's what should be the minimum.
But hold on, isn't that okay?
Yeah, but exactly.
The core product is basically people like us.
Yeah, the core product doesn't really change. That's by and large, most people save, borrow, have a current account and a credit card. That's it, by and large. And what we've seen the innovation is on the margins, like the arguments of the Revolut, we do FX transfers and all that kind of stuff, But by and large, the vast majority of us just bank, and it's pretty boring.
And if you're going to move away from the banks, I also think the credit card guys have done quite well as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, because all of that is now automatic payments. And, okay, you could debate that when you pay with your watch, that's a fintech, and it's not a bank, I get that. But the credit card guys are probably, I don't know the numbers, probably have 90% of still the payments in the UK.
And look at the amount of disruptors in the credit card space. Apart from MBNA, which was an early disruptor, not many.
And if we're going back onto that, if you were to look at expenditure on blockchain, I would guess that 90% of all money being spent on blockchain at the moment is being spent by the big banks.
Yep.
True.
Yeah.
And I think Deutsche Bank was alone spending 300 million.
True.
Right.
So if you look for it, all of the major product sets that most people use for major things, the big banks aren't that bad.
So I totally agree. I think where...
I agree too, but these are not products which make the daily life of people better because driven by technology with better products. It's just the minimum they have to do.
That's true.
If you're 90% of NatWest clients, it does. It's the 10% you're talking about. Yeah, the real cutting edge innovation. Now, what will be interesting to see is whether people like Facebook, who've got a banking license tucked in Ireland or somewhere, as someone told me earlier, whether they start moving into this space.
Well, eBay's already lurking.
Yeah, and
already here.
Yeah, exactly. Now, my view is that, I'm sorry, and also you've got these incumbent new banks coming up, but they'll have real difficulty taking whopping big market share.
I mean, I'd turn the question around almost in another way. There's another organisation out there that's been around for, when did Jeff Bezos found Amazon?
96?
96? And it's 22 years. In 22 years, it has reshaped itself from being a bookseller online to multiple times to being world's largest web provision company and a bunch of other stuff as well. But I suppose the greatest weakness to this argument is that not a single bank has done that.
Well, I mean, you can imagine. Well, what does an individual? What's occurred in the banks the last 8, 9 years is they started moving from banking into wealth management and other services. The regulators meant they've had to sell those services, so they're sort of pulling back just to retail banking. And I think what will be interesting is, let's use the analogy of a television. 10 years ago, you bought a television because it had a great picture. Now, when you buy a television, you buy it because it's got lots of nice apps on it, and you can connect with Netflix, et cetera, et cetera. And so the real question is the bank of the future a place where you can connect to lots of apps, be it your current account, your borrowing, your investment, your ISAs and all that stuff. I think where the banks are missing a trick is that total service provision, which certainly Santander were doing in Spain, but they don't seem to be doing it over here, and no one over here seems to be doing it. So actually, when you think about it, what's going to happen in the world? Well, there's open banking apps coming along. Where are we going to go with that? Is a bank just going to be a provider to of the open bank to another platform like an Amazon who will have all these services, or will the bank become that service? That's an interesting debate as well.
Yeah, so banking as a service versus banking as a product suite. And that's the debate. And if you take the Amazon model, they become banking as a product suite.
Yeah. The thing I say about the Amazon model is there was nothing there before. The trouble is you've got incumbents in financial services, and the difference is when you buy off Amazon, you send money, they give you something. Here you give someone some money, and there's that trust factor. Yeah,
But that's no different to Facebook.
exactly.
You give them your trust, and
Yeah.
then they give you something back. Well, they don't actually, but
But on the other side, if you ask the new generation, like the 20 to 30-year-old people, would you rather trust Amazon or your local bank? A lot of them say Amazon. So
do
if
they
you,
still?
maybe not
So-
after last week.
So I would suggest that the banks have responded well with their apps,
Yes.
which the youngsters are, because a youngster views a bank as an app, not as a building, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think they have responded well enough for the youngsters to believe in that app. Now the question is, I think will WorldPay and those sort of guys come in and Apple Pay, etc., and take over that banking role? I don't know.
So I'd absolutely echo your argument, just switching sides a bit, but it's a good example. I've got teenage kids, and I
You
chat to
don't
them.
look old enough.
I know. Thank you very much. I've got teenage kids, and I chat to all of their friends, not in a malicious way, but I chat to all of their friends about where they bank, and almost to an exception, they all bank with Nationwide. And the reason why they virtually all bank with Nationwide, rather than Go Henry, which is a fantastic product, which I love, they bank with Nationwide because Nationwide has got a free bank account. And it goes back to something we mentioned right at the beginning of the day, which is as long as you have free bank accounts, and they've got pretty good technology, actually, to their credit. Okay, I don't bank Nationwide, so I'm not making an advert, but it's got a free bank account, and you can have a free bank account as a student, and the technology does work. Trust me, I've actually had to use it because I've transferred money in. It does work pretty well, actually. Not bad product, actually. They're pretty damn good, and all the millennials that all the late teenagers that I run into, Nationwide, without an exception.
Yeah. So here's an interesting thing. Most people require at that level is something where they can pay,
Absolutely.
receive, and what have you.
Yeah.
The
If
standard
95%
product.
of
The
world
standard
works,
product set,
that's
exactly.
They're standard products, yeah.
So are we defining, therefore, success as maintaining the key standard products, or success as, in the narrow definition, fintech is new products, a better consumer experience, and a more interactive set of products?
I'd like to, first of all, if you were representing RBS, ask you, or NatWest, what is the core standard product? Is it retail banking? Is it SME banking? Is it what type? What is the core product for these people now? I don't think some of them know. First Direct does. It is retail banking.
Yep.
Nationwide, it is retail.
It's retail.
Yep. But it's interesting with RBS and NatWest, I don't necessarily know. With Lloyds, I don't know. Is it just retail, or is it SME and bigger commercial banking? I don't know.
And maybe that's where the differentiation matters, is because we all hear better penetration rates amongst SMEs who are dissatisfied with the tech products as well as the products of the big banks, as opposed to consumers, where by and large there's not been, neo-challenger bank aside, need a massive migration away from the big banks.
Well, the interesting thing, so here's another debate to have. The retail people like technology, an SME doesn't. No. An SME wants to speak to a person. I agree. They do. I agree if they're borrowing 100 or 200k. If they're borrowing $1 million or 2 or 3 million, they want to speak to a person. They want to speak to someone who can say, actually, you should invoice finance a term loan or whatever it is. And I think, so actually, the SMEs don't like technology. I get you, for small borrowers, they do.
Yes.
The retail people do like technology.
But still, they like it fast. And I think banks are too slow in the SME section. I think that as long as the banks don't see their customers running away, they think they have a good product and they do what the neighbor is doing, like a nice app.
Yeah.
But they are not thinking about what's going on tomorrow, if a Facebook is coming, if Alipay is coming, if Amazon is coming, what will happen to my customer? Why don't I build the products today which I will need tomorrow?
Yeah, so going back to the SME, ironically, I think if the banks kept their branch networks, they're more likely to have SME business than they don't. So actually, what I'm going to agree with you is I think by taking the branch network down, making it less important, I believe you've got to replace it with technology. And I do agree that your platform is doing that.
I'm aware of time because we're going to have to run out. So, okay, so Do you want to do a quick sum up on both sides? So, and then we'll just, anybody hasn't voted, so if I can get you both to a quick sum up, John?
Okay, my summary is the banks have awesome technology. Some of it they can use, some of it they can't use. If they ever wanted to take fintechs out and have the strategic ability to do so, they could do so. I do take your point that the retail banking apps and stuff are pretty damn good. I don't think they're being as innovative as they need to be, but at the same time, they've got regulators breathing down their neck, they've got capital charges breathing down their neck, and it's been very difficult for them in the last 5 to 10 years to be innovative because the environment isn't there for them to do it.
And the counter argument?
Banks, you have to be brave. I mean, something is coming, like a train, full speed, just in your face, and if you don't see it and you just stand there and wait, it will hit you. And therefore, you need to be brave, jump off the, the track,
yeah,
and get a new direction, and therefore build up teams who are inventive and do something and set something on track, because otherwise there is no new path you can jump on once the train hits you. And this train, in my opinion, is not coming from the small fintechs in Germany or in Great Britain, but coming from the big tech companies like an Apple Pay or an Alipay or the Facebooks and the Amazons, because they will make your life tough. And not my life, because since a niche player in the fintech industry, making loans possible to people faster and better than the banks are, I can cooperate also with a Facebook credit factory or whatever, but the banks can't, and then they're out of business.
So let's face it, none of these companies you just mentioned are regulated yet. Yeah? They will get regulated, and they won't be as flexible as they have been in the past, because regulation will take, I mean, Facebook is being defied as we speak.
Access to the customer.
Right, I'm afraid we're out of time. So anybody who hasn't voted, now's the time to vote, please. Just go to the events website of AltFi. It's very easy to vote. So if we can have any last votes, that's at 22. Come on, there must be another 3 or 4 people who are going to vote. Let's just see what the result is. I'm going to have to call it. And otherwise, I think at the moment, John, you've lost.
Yeah, Philip's won.
Oh, mine. Valiantly argued. I even tried to help you out of various points as well. Okay, thank you very much.